Hi, family. Peter, alcoholic.
Hey, Peter.
This is the first time I've got to stand up here and see all you alcoholics all lined up in a row like that. I mean, I've never used to see you guys all lined up. Who says you can't argue? I think I spent the first few years arguing with my sponsor about all this stuff. But anyhow, my sobriety date is February 7th of 1994. I sobered up in Abilene, Texas. I was born in Connecticut, so you can see I did a few geographics trying to run to or run from whatever was going on with me. I will tell you up front that drugs are a part of my story, and I won't apologize for that. They were a part of Bill's story too. And but what I won't do is glorify them or romance them tonight. I hope to package them in an appropriate fashion where they actually fit into my my drinking career, because I was my drug of choice is alcohol. I love the way it tasted. I love the social settings. I love the antisocial settings. I love the chaos. And it all loved me until it didn't anymore. And that's kind of the way it went for me over about 21 years as an adult. If I sit down, please forgive me. I might move around a little bit up here just trying to stay comfortable. So anyhow, I was born thirsty. I didn't have to cross any lines to become an alcoholic. I found out real early in my life that the squeaky wheel got the grease. I'm the oldest of 6 children, 3 boys on top. I have triplet sisters on the bottom. And it was quite a ride when the family doubled its size, almost overnight when I was about 12 years old. I remember my father was a corporate pilot, and he flew usually about 3 weeks at a time max and then was home. And I remember it was time for feedings at night. And I guess that fell on the oldest boy instead of the other 2, because I remember sitting there with my mother. Actually, she reminded me, 12 years old, looking at her while I'm feeding one, and she's got the other 2 saying, you know, I really don't think this is for me. And I thought that was a form of birth control for me. I was to find out later on as I went on down through life that that was not true. I was just as uncomfortable as I hear most of you folks tell me you are when you kind of came to the realization that you were on a planet and inside some skin. And I was always seeking for some kind of affirmation outside of myself. We'd call that performance in whatever arena I was in, whether it was social. I was also a professional musician from about 12 years old on, and played sports, was real good at football and track, and then I had a syndrome hit my left leg, which I'm dealing with now at about 65, 66 years old, and took all of my scholarships and dreams away. And that was when I first kind of walked away from God. He and I had a parting of the roads there. After all, why would he do this to me or allow it to be done to me? And during that angry process, probably about 2 years after this happened, I found alcohol, or alcohol found me. And kind of restored some of that esteem that I thought that God had taken from me. Restored a lot of the social aspects that I believe God had taken from me. What I didn't understand is I didn't have them to start with. I just hid behind the performance of certain things that I was doing at the time. Well, I graduated high school a little early, about 17 and a half, and I kind of got crazy between the ages of 15 and 17 and a half, and my father decided that I could use a little structure, and we didn't have all these treatment centers and things of that nature back in the, let's see, that would have been the late 60s, early 70s. So he thought that the military would be a good place for me to be. So he pops me into the military and into the Air Force, and I go to basic training in San Antonio, Texas. We're not supposed to drink. I think half the plane was drunk by the time we got there, myself included. Probably one of the easiest things I've ever done is basic training in the Air Force, especially when it's 110 degrees at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio. They'd raise that black flag, and all we could do was go to our classes and do some inside PE, and that was it. I think we marched at a parade once. We went to the firing range twice, and we did the PE course once or twice, something like that. That was it. So I really didn't get to deal with any stressful structure when I started out in the military. And then they gave us what they used to call a wish list, and I know why they call it a wish list now, because I put in for Hawaii, San Diego, and I think it was New Hampshire, because my family was still up in Connecticut at the time. And I landed right down the road here at No Hope Pope. And that's exactly where I began my drinking career and learned how to drink. I had a staff sergeant who was my immediate boss. That's all he did was drink. Lunchtime, happy hour, closing, go back to work. That's kind of the structure that we had, or I had with him anyhow. I think I was making somewhere around $230 a month as an E3 at the time when I finally got that last stripe. And that wasn't a lot of money. It was not a lot of money to live on. Especially when I could go play the drums and make that on a Saturday night with a band. So in 1974, Richard Nixon started de-escalating the Vietnam War, and he was giving many of us early outs. Most people got out with 2 years active, 4 years reserve requirement. I wanted to go on the road and play music, so I went to my commander and told him that, and they signed off on that. And here goes this 19-and-a-half-year-old kid traveling around the country. You know, a nice 4104 Greyhound bus. If you don't know what that is, remember the old bus with the scoop that came up on the top? That's what it looked like. And, you know, a guy or a kid my age with a pocket full of money like that was just looking for trouble and a place to happen. And we played most of the country. We got as far north as I believe it was Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. Actually got to see the lights. And I think we went to a drive-in movie once that didn't start until about 3:30 in the morning, because that's how late it took to get dark. And it was dark just long enough to watch a movie. After about 2.5 to 3 years of that, I got tired, bored of playing music. I had a lot of fun while I was doing it. Remember we played the Grand Ole Opry once. Our agent booked us in there for a battle of the bands. And I said, you know, I'm an old rock and roll drummer is where I came from. I said, what the hell you do at country and western battle of the bands? And there were two of us that were drunker than Cooter Brown. One of them was my lead guitarist, and the other one was me. Well, I couldn't sit on that crown. So they went in and found an old stool, one of those straw-type stools, wicker stools. They cut the damn legs off so it was the same height as the crown that I sat on, and strapped me to that son of a bitch with about 2 belts. And that's how I actually went through the concert. Thank God I had the drums in front of me and you couldn't see that. But, you know, just things like that, not paying any consequences for my behavior. Simple stuff that's kind of funny today, but not so funny back then when you got people on the sides of each stage looking at you. I decided that was enough for the music. I actually sold the drums and never played again. Never played again. And to show you how much I needed to have spotlights and I needed to have cash in my pocket, I did turn down some recording studio offers in Nashville, Tennessee. I couldn't see myself going to work from 8 to 5. And I look back at all the developments in the music industry and I say, God damn, boy, that might have been some resourceful stuff there, because the music industry sure did change coming forward from about 1976, 7 on. But anyhow, so I decided to go to work for, get a real job. And I ended up going back to Connecticut. Of course, I've taken a hostage by now. She lived in Laurinburg, just down the road here. I've got 2 older boys from that marriage. One of them is us, and the other one is a very successful businessman. How that came to be, I have no idea. We had some issues. Thank God those issues have gone by the wayside. You know, my oldest son, just as an example, let's see how long you're willing to wait for relationships to be restored. and willing to work this program. About 4 or 5 years ago, he asked me if I would come to his company Christmas party. And he and I were really kind of on the outs. Not kind of, we were on the outs. And I said, before we do that, I think we ought to sit down and have a little talk and clear the air about some things. So I suggested we meet up here at the coffee house. Sorry about that. And, well, I guess I am going to move a little bit. And so we met up at Starbucks. I'll get it later. Just throw it down there. We met at Starbucks, and what was going to be about a 1-hour meeting turned out to be somewhere around 2.5 to 3 hours. There was a lot of laughter. There was a lot of clearing the air, and I accepted the invitation to that to his party. You'll find I'm somewhat animated. That's why I knock things around and shit like that. I usually move my arms. If you tied my arms up, I probably couldn't say a word. But anyhow, I went to that party, and he's got these double French doors that open up. You go into the house, and as I walked in, there were probably about maybe 10 people, 5 on each side, that kind of lined the entryway a little bit. And I introduced myself to these folks because I didn't know who they were. And then all of a sudden, it just kind of parted like the Red Sea. And there's my son, about 8 to 10 feet in front of me, standing there looking at me. Still kind of chokes me up a bunch, but so I walked forward, and I put my arms around him. And the kid would not let me go. He would not let me go. Up until that point in time, he didn't know whether to call me Daddy or Peter. So I kind of let him run with whatever he wanted to. But that night, he spent introducing me to his employees as his daddy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So how long do you want to wait? I was about 24 years sober when that finally happened. Now about 23 years sober when that finally happened. How long do you want to wait for this program to work in certain areas of your life? Today we have a great relationship. We spend a lot of time together at the beach. We talk about business affairs, geopolitical, economic stuff, and very personal stuff that today, as the big book says, carries some depth and weight. Now, let me qualify myself as an alcoholic because I haven't spent a whole lot of time drunk yet, kind of talking about some of the perks of getting sober. I spent a lot of time drinking in those traditional employment areas. I had 3 of them. The first one that I had, just to show you what a functional alcoholic really means, that's when the receptionist is brand new. Pretty little gal up front. You want to include her in your happy hour activities. So we go invite her to the happy hour activities. The conversation becomes a little bit more intimate. She and I go to dinner. The conversation becomes a little bit more intimate. We're thinking about an even quieter place. And just to show you where the big book says that I can't remember, even last week, what the consequences of my drinking behavior are, that is where my romancing the drink stops. I don't remember her husband showing up, or my wife, and my wallet getting lighter. I don't remember that stuff. So whenever I have these romancing type deals, I need to think might be the way you got to get out of it, but my sponsor said you don't need to go anywhere near that. As a matter of fact, that sign, where I sobered up in Texas, is either hanging upside down, sideways, or backwards, usually in most of the meetings that I went to in Abilene, Texas. Now, another functioning alcoholic does get through dinner with a date, finds himself walking out of maybe a 4-star restaurant or something like that, and as I'm walking down the steps, it's the winter time, got to blame it on the winter, my heel goes out from underneath me, and she's got my arm. Thank God I didn't have her arm. And little did I know I was about to go into a gymnastic exercise. And as I slipped forward, I went over this railing, spinned around, dropped flat on my back, rolled over, and blew what I think was dessert. And when I got up, I just kind of wiped my mouth off with the sleeve of my sport coat, and I'm looking around for my date, and she is no more. That was a functioning alcoholic for me. I continued to drink like that, thinking that there's nothing going on here. I took another hostage at this point up in Connecticut, and I remember our car needed some work. So I borrowed her mother's car, and I was driving down the road about 40 miles an hour, blew right through a stop sign, a four-way stop. No, it was a two-way stop, because coming the other way was a snowplow with no blade on the front, just the three-prong suspension that would normally hold that blade. And he hit me at about the same speed. And if you don't think there's a God you're misunderstanding, think again, because those two prongs on the bottom went right underneath my seat, and the one on the top knocked the headrest off behind my head. And I found myself going about 40 miles an hour in that direction. Well, when he finally stops and the ambulance gets there, you know, the fire department always gets there ahead of the police, even back in those days. I rolled out the passenger door and got over to the ambulance, and they gave me an okay physically, and I just walked away from the scene. No consequences at all for running that stop sign. None whatsoever. I've never had a DUI. I tried. But the police apparently weren't interested in giving me a DUI. So I had so many incidents like that where I should have been behind bars, literally, or dead. I found this one moment in time where I decided I was going to be a lumberjack. Bought this house out on a lake in Holland, Massachusetts, nice little log cabin. Bought myself a big old dump truck and started cutting down all the hardwood I could up there that people would give me permission to do. So you notice I've ruined one vehicle in the family. I'm using her father's vehicle at this point. He's got a truck because I need a smaller one to move some of this stuff. Well, I had this big hardwood, and it kind of split about 15 feet up in the air and kind of went up, and I got it all the way down to here, and of course it was, God, it must have been 5 feet around, and I'm digging into this thing, and I'm digging into this thing. Well, it didn't fall the way I thought it was going to fall. And it came right down behind his cab, cut that truck in half. So here my in-laws are with no vehicles, and mine's coming out of the shop. To say that I had some financial amends would be an understatement when I finally got to step 9. This would be years later. Again, no consequences, because they loved their little girl, and they didn't think much of me, but they put up with me because of her choice. You know, just things like that happened to me while I was drinking that could have been much worse to myself and others. So a friend of mine decides to go to Texas. I'll get myself to Texas where I really wind up my drinking. And he was what you'd call a cooler. I'm sure you've seen Patrick Swayze at the bar. And why he took a job with American Airlines in Dallas, Texas is beyond me. But apparently he wanted to change too. And he was down there for about, maybe 6 to 8 weeks, and he gave me a call and says, Peter, you got to come to Texas. Didn't have to get into much of the details, but I could tell by his voice and his delivery that apparently there was something in Texas. So I had about 3 weeks vacation coming. I put in for that, and it was about another 4 weeks before I could get there. And I headed down to Texas. And I'll tell you what, I never saw so much flesh and pool water and cocaine and alcohol and you name it. I remember standing, I don't know if y'all remember the old Dallas series. I remember standing at the front fence looking at the South Fork Ranch saying, man, I looked at him and said, I've got to get to Texas. And I was in Texas about 6 weeks later. And that's how I got to Texas. I continued my drinking career down there. And if I say I picked up another hostage, you can rest assured that I've relieved myself of the two prior to that. So I picked up one more hostage in Texas, and she's the mother of my 3 little girls. And I was fairly successful in business. I always have been, but I could never take that thought process into my private life, my social life. I figured I worked like an animal all day long. I had the right to be an idiot when the sun went down. And that was kind of the way everything went in my life. So I drank for about another 8 years or so, and she finally looked at me one night and said, "You've got to go. You've got to go. You need to go get well so that maybe I can get well." Well, I did what every functioning alcoholic does. I made sure I had a 12-pack before I went to bed that night, and got up the next morning. I think I had a mustache, shaved that off, wanted to look decent for the public. I don't know why, and I hit the road, walking. And in Abilene, Texas, you got a hospital at both ends of the city. There's about 135,000 people there. The one at the north end of town is an older hospital. It has the detox and all of the counseling and things of that nature to lead you into a treatment center. And the one on the other side is the newer hospital. Well, I decided to go the old one because that's where they had the facilities that I thought I needed. Bear in mind, I know very little, if anything at all, about Alcoholics Anonymous. Never been there, never met anybody from there, and didn't even know it was part of the solution. So as I was walking about 5 miles to that hospital on the north side, I got within visual and I looked up at that and I said, I'll bet that newer facility on the other side of town is probably going to have a lot more stuff for me. So I spun my ass around and started walking the other direction, which would have been about a 10-mile walk. Got halfway, and here's a church. Now, this is a Thursday. I say that because no one should be at this church, driving by this church. And I just decided to sit down on the front porch for just a little bit and relax. My feet were sore. I was exhausted, and truth be known, I was scared to death about what was in front of me. And the pastor of that church just happened to be driving by. Thursday, go figure. No meetings there, no nothing. And he pulls in and walks up, and I had met him before, and he invited me in, and that was the first time that I began to, let's just say, the cracks in the wall began to show up. I even think I dropped a tear or two. I don't know if it was on purpose or if it actually happened legitimately. But he wrote down on a little piece of paper a number for me, and a fellow by the name of Bill. And that was my first sponsor's name, also Bill. And so I didn't know what that was about. It didn't say AA, it didn't say anything like that. He said, "Why don't you call this number?" And he put me up in a motel. Now, this motel just happened to be in the red light district of Abilene, Texas. I wondered what this guy was doing with his church in the red light district, but that was none of my business. I had a place to sleep, and it wasn't on me. And that's kind of the way I looked at it. And what's interesting is the next night, I just slept for a solid 16 hours. And the next night, the pool was empty. And they had a bonfire going on down the bottom of the pool, and I could hear all the music, and I could smell all the aromas. All the mind-altering, emotion-altering aromas, including the alcohol. It was thick. And that was the first time I said, I'm not even interested. So the next morning, I look at the number, and I made the phone call. And Bill asked me, "When's the last time you ate?" And I said, "Well, it's been a couple of days anyhow." And Bill shows up. He said, "I'll be there shortly." Bill shows up about 45 minutes later with a sleeve of saltine crackers, a can of Spam, plastic knife, plastic fork, and 3 bottles of water. That was my first AA buffet. And I think he brought that just to keep my mouth shut while he talked. And he talked for about 15, 20 minutes or so, and he shared what to me were horror stories. I hear them in here all the time. But he shared it in such a way that he wasn't ashamed of it. He'd gotten past it. And of course, I didn't know all these things, but he was just talking to me differently. I heard somebody talking about the language of the heart earlier in here. See, I listened to conversations. That was the first book my home group gave me when I got a year. The little card was The Language of the Heart. What a great book. And that's what he was doing. He was sharing the language of the heart with me. And so come time for me to leave the hotel or the motel, and I thought they'd put me up a little while longer. But apparently not. They have a low tolerance for drunks, or at least that church did. They'll help you out a little bit. And so it was time for me to leave, and I'm talking to the guy that came down and 12-stepped me, and he says, I said, where am I going to go? He said, well, the Salvation Army is about 1.5 miles down the road in the industrial section. I said, okay. So I'm walking down Industrial Boulevard, looking to the left, and there's the building my office used to be in up on the 4th floor, and I can't even look up that high anymore because all I can look at are my shoes. I'm so ashamed of where I've come at this point in time. I get to the Salvation Army, I walk through the front door, and I'm not done yet. I put my bags behind the building, or the one bag I had, and I walked in there like I was inspecting the goddamn building, and went into the bathroom, came back out. This pretty little lieutenant gal was sitting there at the desk. She knew what was going on. She just smiled at me, didn't say a word, didn't engage me, let me go back out the front door, walked around behind the building, and when I got to my bag, I had 2 thoughts. A lot of you refer to these as your aha moments. The first thought I had was that everything that I had ever done or said was never going to work again. And the second thought I had was, I had no idea what would. So I grabbed that bag and I went back around inside and I sat down, and by now I'm ready to let a lot of this go. And she listened, and she put me up as what they call a transient. What that means is I have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I can have breakfast, but I need to leave the property. I can come back for lunch, but I have to leave the property. And then I can come back for dinner. I can stay and have a nice hot meal, a shower, and a cot. The reason for that was I had told her that this guy that came and talked to me was working on a bed for me at a treatment center. It's called the Serenity House. I too went through a treatment center to find Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you did or you didn't, it doesn't matter. If you're here, I'm glad you're here. That's what's important. I needed what I found in that treatment center. I had to spend 3 weeks at the Salvation Army doing that routine. And it's kind of cold in West Texas in February, the end of January. And I found this building where the sun used to rise. And I would get in between these 2 big metal buildings that would block the wind, which was 25, 35 miles an hour almost constantly. And the sun would start to rise, and I would get just a little bit warmer, living like a goddamn animal and thinking like one too. And I would walk around that particular part of town, looking at the ground, and I gathering change. Found just enough change, or I thought I was going to find. If I found a buck, I was going to play the lottery, because Texas had a lottery back then. And you know, at 150 million to 1, I got a real good odd of doing that. And then I'm out of here again and off to the races. Well, I managed to collect somewhere around 65, 70 cents or something like that. So on the way out, I just tossed it in their basket as I headed over to the Serenity House. And then the first lecture that the house, the director of the program gave, and I didn't know if I was in the right place. She says, you know, without Alcoholics Anonymous, we would be just another unsuccessful medical center. And I said, damn, I ain't gonna find the help either. But as time progressed, I began to understand what she meant by that. Because we went to at least a meeting a day, sometimes 2, and we had our own in-house there. We were co-ed, I think there were about 18 of us at the time. Now they own a block and they're running about 90 to 100 through that facility with lots of houses and all kinds of stuff, doing great work. And I needed every one of those lectures. The sociology, the psychology, all the other ologies and everything else makes for great conversation. Not a bit of it will keep me sober. I love to engage people in that. This is what keeps me sober. My sponsor, Bill became my sponsor, and he bugged out for the last 3 weeks that I was there, so I had to go find my own sponsor to do a fifth step with, because I had to complete a fifth step in order to complete the program. So that all happened, and I ended up getting out, and we used to call it stepping off the curb. That's what it was for us, is stepping off the curb, and the big book refers to that as re-entering the mainstream of society. Scarier than hell, because here I am with about 4 weeks worth of tools that I'm completely unfamiliar with, and my sponsor's not back yet. And anyhow, he gets back. And you'll often hear about guys in here, they'll say they're reading the book with their sponsor. This is the third edition. This is what I sobered up on, 1994. My sponsor sobered up on the second edition in 1971, and his sponsor sobered up on the first edition in 1948, I believe. That's my lineage in Alcoholics Anonymous. But you'll hear often that, or sometimes, where a sponsor will open the page to this book in the page, and they'll ask you what you see. And the common response is nothing. And they'll say, that's what you know about staying sober. My sponsor did not do that. You probably can't see it, but right at the end of my finger is a dot from an ink pen. And he put that on the page when he opened the book. He said, what do you see? And I said, a dot from your ink pen. He said, all that white on that page and all you see is that little dot. We're going to work on your perception. And he was right. And what he meant by that is I choose to see the things that I want to see. I did that before when I was drinking, and even today, 27 years later, if I don't stay close to my sponsor, and that's that fossil sitting right there in the front seat, and I love him dearly. I'll tell you what, he keeps my ass kind of right down the narrow, straight and narrow. So I've always been fortunate to have a sponsor. I've moved 3 times, once to Arizona, and that's where I almost got drunk after about 6 or 7 years. That part in the book where it says, there will come a time. Well, that time came. And just a quick little story about that. That marriage was about to collapse, unbeknownst to me. I was blindsided by certain behavior, and I was ashamed of what someone else had done. I had not reconnected with Alcoholics Anonymous yet. I was there for almost 4 months. I was trying a long-distance sponsor with my sponsor in Texas, and he said, Peter, you need to get eyeball to eyeball with somebody, or you're going out. And, well, I made the decision that I was going out because I'd had enough of it. And I remember, some of you may remember Y2K, 2000, the toasters were supposed to start eating us, cars were supposed to start running over us and all that good stuff. And I remember standing out on the corner in Tempe, Arizona, looking up, street lights all around me, a little bit of traffic, coming up on midnight, fixing to change to the year 2000, looking forward to being devoured by something and not having to handle this. And I'll be damned. If midnight came, the street lights kept working, the cars stayed on the road, and I said, oh shit, I'm going to have to deal with this mess. Well, at that point, I continued to look up. It's funny, God's always up there somewhere. Big Book tells me he's buried in here. And even with time, I still look up. So I just, I looked up and I said, if this is the best this goddamn organization has to have, fuck it. I'm done. And I said it in such a way where I meant it. I was done. And I had about a little less than 6 years at that point in time. And there was a restaurant up in North Scottsdale that I had been to with my dad about, 3 or 4 years earlier for my sister's wedding. Beautiful restaurant, tiki torches, nice pond, all this good stuff. But it was a reservations-only restaurant, and I knew that if I went into that restaurant without a reservation, you go in the front door, the restaurant's this way, the bar is right there. They stick you in a bar if you don't have a reservation. I didn't even have the courage to go buy my own alcohol. I wanted to blame it on a receptionist or a hostess that stuck me in the bar. Well, I walked in there that night, and this pretty little gal, about 20 years old, probably one of the college students, was behind a podium just like this. And I said, I don't have a reservation, but I sure would like to eat here tonight. And she looked at me and said, stand right there for just a minute. She froze me in my tracks. Probably the only direction I have followed for the last 4.5 months. She went around this little partition. She came back around. Couldn't have been more than 60 seconds. And she said, you're in luck. We've had a cancellation. Not only did I get a table, I got the best table in the house, overlooking the lake, the tiki torches and all that stuff. And I ate well. Now, by now, I had gone from about 170 pounds, and I'm carrying about 190 right now, down to about 145 because of the emotional anxiety and everything else that I put myself through without any sponsorship. I went from about a 33-inch waist down to a 26-inch waist. So I tinied up pretty good at this particular point. And but after that great meal, some of you heard me share part of this. I got home that night and I looked up some AA groups and found one just up the road. And I wasn't much of a blue jean wearer when I got here. I was sharing that with Richard earlier. My sponsor had to force me into blue jeans, and I felt naked going around town in that. But anyhow, I pulled up into this kind of a old strip mall area, and I never saw so many Harleys in all of my life. And I went inside, and oh my God, this gal came up to me, and I used to kid Andy. I don't see him here tonight, but he looks kind of tiny compared to her. And she kind of wrapped her arms around me, and she said, welcome, we love you. And she picked me up off the floor, and she was just hugging me, and I said, damn. And the two emotions I like to share is that I was both terrified and aroused at the same time. And I thank God I didn't take the actions behind the aroused, because I met her husband about 30 seconds later, who was about 50% larger than her. And these were real muscles. And so anyhow, he became my sponsor, and they loved me to death until I came back to life, went back to Texas, and resolved, or let's say dissolved, that marriage. And it's interesting how if you keep doing what this program suggests that you do, some of the strangest things will happen, or at least to me, that I can't explain. I found myself in divorce court. I don't know that any of them are, I don't think I've met one couple that's had a reasonable divorce and were friends, because my daughter babysitted them. They actually had houses right across the street. They were two bankers. Anyhow, that didn't work out for me. It was nasty. Asset allocations, and now we were fighting for custody. And I'm sitting there with my attorney, and she's sitting there with her attorney, and this judge comes out. I haven't seen him. It's the first time I've seen him. We get started on this. And all of a sudden, I'm writing with one of those magic markers on my legal pad, because my attorney says, you write down anything you need me to say or want to do here. And that's the guy. I'm putting down on this piece of paper. He says, that's the guy? I said, yeah, that's the guy that court committed me to the treatment center 7 years ago, that judge. Well, that judge ended up giving me residential custody of those 3 girls. There were some issues with mommy. I won't get into that, but in Texas, I don't know if you've ever heard a judge refer to the mother, but it's, you will not mess with my girls. So that is completely out of character back then when this happened. So we went forward. I found myself, I like to refer to it as that dog that always chases the cars in the neighborhood, but they never catch him. Well, I was a dog that caught the goddamn car, and I had no idea what to do with these 3 little girls. And so, my thank God my sponsor put me in Al-Anon and said, you need to keep going there more often, because that helped me with my hands-off kind of situation. I thought I could bring all my business etiquette into that family, and boy, they would go for that structure. They didn't go for that structure. As a matter of fact, the best that I could do was provide environments They loved to go to church. We were there every time the doors were open. My oldest daughter loved to sing and play tennis. Those were her activities. So you had a singing coach, tennis coach. My middle daughter was baseball and basketball, so she had those coaches plus the church pastor for kids. My youngest daughter was a soccer player and basketball, and she too had other fantastic people. So the most successful I could be as a parent was to put them in environments where there were successful people. And I remember one night, this gal at church says, my girls are standing there, and she says, 3 girls. How do you do this? And they're so polite. And my older daughter says, we've raised him well, don't you think? And nothing could be farther from the truth, because that was the truth. I was really along for the ride, if you will, with those gals. And I've had, I love to sponsor guys. I don't do much in the business meetings anymore or any of that structure. Spend a lot of time with men. I like that behind the scene, one-on-one. I will speak and I'll share. I try to go to 4 or 5 meetings a week. And I have other activities that I'm trying to slow down now. I'm 66 years old. I've had, I'll share one interesting encounter I had with a sponsor in Texas. I do it just the way my sponsor did it with me and the way his sponsor did it with him. And that was 164 pages, the 12 and 12, and the traditions. And when we're done, usually 9 months to a year later, I know you pretty well, you know me, because my sponsor said this is a relationship building tool and you're going to need all the relationship help you can get going down the road. That's that fellowship that's supposed to grow up around me that I will crave. Now, I didn't know much about fellowship, but I sure did know about cravings. One final story about how this sponsee came to me, and then I'm done. I just got back from Arizona, and all this legal stuff had been taken care of, well, maybe 2. And this young fella came up to me. He was probably, I'd have been in my mid-40s at the time, so he would have probably been late 20s, somewhere in that area. And he asked me if I would sponsor him. And I said, well, what I like to do, this is what my sponsor did, is let's sit down and we'll have a cup of coffee and we'll talk for about an hour and we'll see if you want to hire me. It's kind of what I say a lot of the time, you know, because you really don't know me in a meeting. You hear what I say, but you get to watch me one-on-one for an hour. And so we started the conversation. It was kind of surface at first. And then he looked at me and said, you know, I've been having trouble getting a sponsor. Sharp kid. And I said, what do you mean you've been having trouble getting a sponsor? He said, well, I'm gay. Now, at that moment in time, and what went through my mind took just probably 5 seconds at the most, but you could see the change in the expression in my face, my body language demeanor, and it was as if something was really troubling me. And what I was thinking about is, oh shit, how am I going to handle page 69 and 70 and all this other shit going through my head that is absolutely irrelevant to sponsoring another man. And he must have saw my baffling befuddlement or whatever. And he looked at me just as serious could be, and he said, but you don't have to worry. And I said, what do you mean I don't have to worry? He said, you're not my type. And I said, what do you mean I'm not your type? I said, I may not be gay, but I sure want to be somebody's type. And we laughed about that, and we sat there for about 3 hours. And I got to watch this kid get out of a bad relationship into a good one. I watched his retail career soar, and I watched him sponsor both homosexual and heterosexual men successfully. What a great program. We are people who normally wouldn't mix. We truly are. And that's what this program has given me. So many examples like that where I need to get out of my own head and set down those prejudices and preconceived ideas that I got here with, because they still want to jump up and help me make decisions. That's why I got him, so he can remind me I'm outside the tracks. And so I'm grateful that you all are here tonight. Sorry I made a mess up here, but like I said, I can't speak if I don't move my arms. So it really is it's a tremendous journey, at least it has been for me. My prayer for you is that your life will be better than mine, as it should be. because you have more experience to draw on. My sponsor once told me before I left Texas to move here, he said that my prayer for you is that you stay sober long enough so that you can become the child that you've always wanted to be. Thanks for letting me share.